Hello and welcome again to today's webinar, Raising the Bar, Introducing Baseline Expectations for eduroam. This is our mostly monthly webinar focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Program Manager for Cohorts and Accelerators at the InCommon Academy, and I'll be your host for today. To get us started, here's just a brief overview of today's agenda. We will do some, there's the agenda. We'll do some brief introductions and hear from our presenters. Then we'll have an opportunity for you all to ask questions and then a few closing remarks. And I am seeing a question in the chat that yes, we will be recording this. This is recorded and we'll have it available to you after. As always, we will be taking questions and comments live from you all using the Zoom Q&A function. So please send us your questions during this presentation and we will address those midway through and then at the end. We also encourage you to go ahead and post your messages and questions in the chat. Your comments are here for group discussion, so just be sure when you're posting, your message is being sent to everyone from the dropdown so we can all see those comments. And then again, yes, this event is being recorded. If you registered for this, you will receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And these materials are also going to be posted on the InCommon website and the IAM online YouTube channel. So watch your inbox for those links. So, and now we are excited to begin today's webinar, Raising the Bar, Introducing Baseline Expectations for eduroam. We're going to hear from Derek Eiler and Mike Dixon from the eduroam Advisory Committee, who will share the committee's vision for elevating eduroam service quality through baseline expectations. And so to kick things off today, I'm going to turn things over to our moderator for today, our Mike Zawacki, our eduroam Senior Program Manager at Internet2. So Mike, I will go ahead and turn things over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jody. Yeah, welcome everybody. And thank you again for making time for this. We know time is precious and we really appreciate you jumping in and learning more about the work that the eduroam US community is doing to make eduroam better, faster, stronger. Thanks. Well, that helps us kind of guide our discussion a little bit and know sort of where to steer the conversation. So just a quick reminder here that eduroam isn't a product that a vendor came up with and is selling to the community. It is a community resource that was generated by the community, the international research and education community. So what is eduroam? Real quick elevator speech for those who might be interested in learning a bit more here. It's the Federated Authentication Service for global wireless access for the research and education community. So what that means is that participating institutions provide access to their wireless networks to users from other eduroam connected institutions and their own institutions as well. So this does two really important things. For the users, it provides an assurance that the Wi-Fi that they're joining is part of the larger community of shared practices, that the network that they're connecting to has essentially been vetted by the community. And for those who are provided or who are opening up their networks, it provides an assurance to them that the users who are coming in have been vetted by members of their community. Again, they're not J-random user off the street, and they have a way to sort of to follow up on bad behavior. They have a point of escalation and additional tools to keep their network safe. So again, it's not just a guest network or a way for your users to roam. Really what it is a way to configure your Wi-Fi to be more secure and privacy preserving. We actually touched on this a little bit in an IAM Online from last year, which eerily enough was a day apart from this IAM Online. We didn't mean for this to happen, but it did. So I'd encourage folks to go ahead and look up that IAM Online. You can learn more about how to secure your eduroam or your network for when using eduroam. So the kind of the major players in this ecosystem are, what make it up are InCommon or Internet 2, our international partners, uh, and roaming operators here in the US and across the world. And I kind of highlighted eduroam support organizations. They're a bit of a special case, but also very important in the growth of eduroam US, and drove some of the conversation, as you'll hear from Derek and Mike in a moment. So Internet 2 is the eduroam service owner, or what we call the roaming operator for the US. That means that we ensure that the service is delivered and supported to the US community. We manage business operations like contracting and invoicing. And we operate the eduroam Federation Manager, which is the administrative interface that folks use to manage their service. We also created the eduroam Advisory Committee, which is a group of community experts who provide their expertise and guidance on eduroam. It ensures that that Internet 2 is operating the service in a way that is responsive to the community, and it gives everybody a voice in how eduroam is run here in the US. And we work with the Global Eduroam Governance Committee. I'll talk about them in just a second on policy governance matters. So again, eduroam is not just in the US, it is a global community, and there are numerous other national research and education networks like Canary, SurfNet, Géant, and others who operate eduroam across the world. And Géant is known as what is known as the eduroam global operator. So they provide the policy and technical leadership for the eduroam service overall. And they sort of lead the charge of a little over 100 roaming operators across the world. And I mentioned that Global Eduroam Governance Committee, GEGC. They provide guidance on operating principles for eduroam globally to make sure that the service is interoperable across international borders, that it always sort of acts the way that folks expect. The GEGC is made up of representatives from roaming operators across the world, and the GEGC is responsible for creating and updating what's known as the eduroam compliance statement. And if you read your eduroam agreement, you probably would have noticed references to that. What it really is a kind of a global set of best practices and requirements to make sure, again, that the service runs as expected and that the way everyone is running it doesn't break it for anyone else. And it's worth noting that the GGC is not like the eduroam cops. They're not the Interpol of the eduroam world. Their enforcement powers are pretty limited, and really they focus a lot more on collaborative problem solving. And I'm going to go ahead and spell out again a little more on the eduroam support organizations. Again, while not every state has an eduroam support organization, the work that they're doing in opening up eduroam to K-12's libraries and museums is really important and worth noting here. And I think it might also be worth noting that Derek Eiler represents the Nevada System of Higher Education, which is the eduroam support organization, or ESO, for the state of Nevada. So you can pose eduroam or ESO questions to him as well as to me. So an ESO is a regional network or other organization that serves K-12s and other educational entities in their state or their region. The program is sort of centered around contractual simplicity and scalability. So an ESO signs a single agreement, pays a single fee for all of the K-12's libraries, museums in their state, and they can also operate SP only, or what we call hotspots, without cost. And in exchange, they take on portions of the service delivery and provide first level support for their constituents, their K-12's libraries, museums, and hotspots. And they also assist those constituents in provisioning the eduroam service. And they're also responsible for managing the contracting or invoicing of any of their constituents. They have pretty broad leeway as to how they want to handle that. Again, sort of the program is designed to be as flat and simple as possible. And we understand that, the saying is, if you know how one regional operates, you know how one regional operates. There's a diversity of how they're funded, organized, and who they serve. So we wanted, again, kind of to make sure that the program was flexible enough to account for that. And it's worth noting too that there's only one eduroam organization per state. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike Dixon.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Dixon from UMass Amherst. Um, so one of the questions is why do baseline expectations now? Why are we interested in getting together some set of guidelines now? And the reality is eduroam is growing a lot in the U.S. And by the way, in a previous chart, Mike was talking about the other organizations worldwide for eduroam. U.S. is actually number two, and behind Brazil, with the highest number of locations, eduroam locations in the country, which is really an astounding figure. Um, but what we have here is we have year over year since 2021, the last 5 years, we see growth. The blue represents more or less the individual SP and IDPs that are growing. This was more, I guess you might call it traditional growth. Individual educational institutions would come and subscribe to the eduroam service, become part of the federation, and that growth is still trending up, and it's again about 5% year over year. But with the advent of the ESOs, we've really seen a lot of explosive growth, again, in the K-12, libraries, museums, but also community colleges and other higher education institutions. And that's represented by the yellow here in the bar. And so that really is driving a lot of the growth that we're seeing. Next slide, please. And here is another snapshot of how the ESOs are contributing to the rapid growth. The baseline blue is the standard SP and IDP individual growth. And again, that represents about a 5% growth chart year over year. And we see a lot of growth because of the ESO, because of the forming of the ESOs, and because of the adoption. And right now, under the current model, by 2030, ESO subscribers are projected to make up about 75% of all authentications, only account for about 33% of all users, but about 75% of all authentications. And again, this includes libraries, museums, town governments, other locations that otherwise would have been underserved, couldn't or couldn't offer eduroam, even as an SP. The ESOs really kind of make that, as Mike was saying earlier, make that easier, a lower bar for entry, and sort of groups everything together so that the constituents at those end subscribers have a really easy way forward. Next slide. So maturing and scaling the service and communication, that's really what this baseline expectation documentation is about. We're ready to meet the needs of today's growth and the future growth. And the value of eduroam, it scales with ubiquity and also its consistency due to its distributed nature. We've got a lot of different especially with the advent of the ESOs, there's a lot of different growth. There's a lot of different groups of folks running subscriber locations, and it's a really good time to set a baseline standard that would map across all subscribers, that are easy to follow, plain to understand, and helps us grow forward and forward. I'm going to take a moment. I'll read this baseline expectations for eduroam US introduction. Every stakeholder has an interest in ensuring the eduroam US service is characterized by a consistently high degree of quality, user experience, support, security, and privacy. To this end, and inspired by the prior work of the baseline expectations for trust in federation, the following baseline expectations were developed for the eduroam US service. These expectations reflect the community's desire to hold itself accountable for providing a successful, valuable, interoperable, and trustworthy shared resource. Next slide, please. So here we are. What do we have? We have rapid growth of eduroam in US, increasing diversity of the community, which made clear a need for standardization, some baseline, some guidelines. The EAC and eduroam US identified federated baseline expectations effort as a model to address this need. The EAC formed a working group, of which myself, Derek, and Mike are members of, for the eduroam US baseline expectations. The working group has been drafting a set of requirements. We reported out to community at TechX 24 in Boston last year. and we'll do so again at TechX 25. So that leads us to our next steps. Right now, we're in a mode of collecting data to inform current baselines. Gotta see where we are now before we can go forward, and then measure future adoption of baseline expectation practices. We'll do another, as I mentioned, community report out to TechX 25 in Denver in December, and then we'll present to InCommon for formal feedback and adoption. Next, please. That leads me to another poll. We might have a poll engine for this. What is your biggest pain point as an eduroam administrator or an eduroam user? So thank you for all for all who did respond. And I'm going to hand this next slide over for Derek to start talking about some of the content of the baseline expectations document that we're preparing.
Great, thank you, Mike. So hi there, Derek Eiler from the Nevada System of Higher Education. As we start talking about baseline expectations, one thing that our working group developing it realized very quickly was that there's a need for a common vocabulary, right? Common terminology. And with that, I'm not going to read each term on this slide to you all, but we do lay it out in the draft document and present it here for you to look at. As you know, being a federation, there are a lot of commonalities with, say, the InCommon Federation for web single sign-on. And so some of the terms are familiar to most of you. IDP is an identity provider, SP is a service provider. What exactly those mean in the eduroam context is a little different, but we decided to lay them out in detail just to keep things nice and clear in the document. But a term you may not have seen before that we settled on for the expectations document was subscriber, to more generally refer to an IDP that also operates an SP, or a strictly SP. Just means any organization that's registered to use the eduroam US service. So that may be a little unfamiliar in your vocabulary for eduroam. Just keep an eye on that. We also have the NRO, in other words, Internet 2. They are the roaming operator for the US, so we refer to them as the National Roaming Operator. ESO, which Mike Z and Mike D already touched on, because most folks don't know what an ESO is. Even folks who are in the sphere of influence of an ESO may not be familiar with what exactly an ESO is. So we laid that out a bit. Again, emphasizing that this is a support role, and it's an ESO is a newer part of the eduroam community. Constituent, that's more of an ESO specific term. It just refers to an IDP or SP registered and supported by an ESO. Visitor is anyone who's affiliated with an IDP who connects to another subscriber's eduroam network. It's often used interchangeably with guest, but for the purposes of this document, we decided to split those out. Visitor is someone visiting who uses eduroam. A guest is just more generally, a wireless guest. Next slide, please. All right, and so that brings us to the expectations of all subscribers. In the expectations, we break it into sections: expectations of all subscribers, expectations of IDPs, expectations of SPs, expectations of the NRO, and expectations of ESOs. And with that, we felt it was important to really lay this out very clearly, just like in the baseline expectations for trust and federation work that was previously done, to make this crystal clear that there are expectations. Historically, many institutions went through the work of setting up eduroam. The person who's setting up left, retired. Their wireless environment evolved, and it turned into kind of a set it and forget it thing. And fast forward a few years to 10 years, and nobody really knows what the expectations around eduroam are. It just kind of becomes institutional lore, right? So we wanted to lay this out very clearly. And with that, I'm not going to go over every individual expectation, because that would that wouldn't be terribly helpful. But you'll see that we break it down into general expectations, like expectations about service quality, accurate contact information, attribute minimization, and privacy. And then we go into a little bit more detail and try to keep things fairly, everyday language, and not get too technical and jargony with that. So let's breeze through these real quick. Around service quality, we already talked about that. The eduroam service is valuable if everyone takes good care of it, right? And with that, many folks forgot or don't know about the eduroam compliance statement from the GEGC. So we lay that out there right up front to remind everyone there is a global framework here, and the U.S. doesn't operate eduroam in a vacuum. We talk about how eduroam should be operated just like any other Wi-Fi network you have. It's not a side gig or side hustle type of network. It's a legitimate enterprise wireless network. You wouldn't want your everyday network for your campus to be down. Similarly, you don't want eduroam to go down. For those of you who don't use eduroam as your primary SSID. We talk about accurate contact information. If we can't get a hold of you, and I say we, any member of the community. If a member of the community can't get a hold of you when there's trouble, well, that really erodes the quality and trust of this federation of eduroam subscribers. Similarly, if your map is not up to date, nobody knows that you offer eduroam. Maybe you opened another campus 3 years after you deployed eduroam. Go update them on the map, right? So other folks can see it. Attribute minimization and privacy, I'd encourage you to review that IAM online from last October, where we go into great detail about some real practical steps. But this is just a reminder that eduroam is not a credential harvesting network for your marketing purposes to reach out to all your visitors and so forth. Next slide, please. All right, and with that, we'll jump to the next poll question. Which is as follows. If a cybersecurity incident involving an eduroaming visitor occurred at your campus, do you feel confident that you could reach someone at the visitor's home organization to escalate that issue or get help in a timely manner? This is a yes/no question, so hopefully we get a lot of responses. And again, many of these questions are for the baseline expectations working groups benefit, so we can get a sense of how deeply felt are some of these issues. All right, thank you, Jenny. Looks like the poll is closed, and it's surprisingly even. I wasn't expecting that. Roughly 50-50, a little in favor of the no's, not confident you could get help and escalate to the other organization in a timely manner. All right. Well, thank you for that. And with that, to give my vocal cords a rest, we'll hand it back over to Mike D for a bit.
Thanks, Derek. Next slide. So we talked about Derek just touched on the expectations of all providers. And he also mentioned that there is a smaller expectation subset for just IDPs, SPs, and other groups. And this talks a little bit about the expectations of the IDPs, identity providers. If you're a school and you run eduroam and your users have identity, you're an identity provider. And the first thing is user accountability. And we talked about that poll really kind of touched out on this. If a visitor misbehavior lodged by an SP are duly investigated, users are sanctioned by their own IDP when appropriate. What that means is investigate reports about your own users from another service provider. Look into it, respond. And they're strongly encouraged, our IDPs, our schools, eduroam schools are encouraged to comply with the requirements of the REFED's security incident response trust network, the CertFi. That'll provide a good set of guidelines on how to respond, timeliness, what to respond to, what not to respond to. It's actually a really good already baked response compliance statement. So that highly suggest anybody to give that a call, to a read. User education and support. Basically, are you telling your users at your school, at your campus, how to use eduroam, how to onboard? Are there EAP-type certification onboardings? How do they get on? How do they get connected? The onus of the IDP for their own users is to educate their users and get them on board before they travel. When a user travels, when one of your constituents travels, obviously they go to another school, they really can't bother that help desk on why they can't connect to eduroam. There may be a myriad of problems. That school will basically just lightly touch on, is my school's eduroam running? Is it working? If they say yes, they can't really look in and find out why you couldn't connect. Could be a myriad of reasons. Um, so we want to make sure that we're educating our users before they leave the campus how to get on, make sure that they're connected to eduroam. For those of you who run multiple 802.1x networks and you have a subset of users who you expect will be traveling, perhaps it's faculty or others, make sure that they're using eduroam as the 1x if on campus, if they're programmed for that, or at least if that's at least one of the supplicant um, um, settings, then when they do travel, they'll automatically connect to eduroam out there. So, give them all the tools they need before they travel. And then finally, roaming reciprocity. If you expect your users, if you're running eduroam, you're a subscriber to the eduroam constituency, and you have users, maybe they're using eduroam on your campus, but when they travel, if you expect them to connect to eduroam when they travel, then you should be also expected to provide eduroam services for when users from other schools travel to you. So kind of a quid pro quo, and that's what really makes this federation work. Part of the baseline expectations is that sort of spirit of understanding. And there may be reasons, there may be some edge case reasons why this may not work, but it would be really not a lot of reasons that we can think of, and we'd want to know why. We would really want to know why a school might not do that. But to make this federation work and to make it go smoothly, you host others at your school as you would want to be hosted at another school. Next slide, please. So expectations of SPs, and that these are hotspot operators. And again, these could be retail, museums, these could be libraries. The goal is that don't offer other hoops, and this will be spelled out in the baseline expectations. Gracious hosting. Visitors are offered the same or better level of service or as authenticated guests. They're authenticating by 1x by an IDP with a username or some credential in the background, which is really a strong AAA identity management access protocol that we know who they are. So they're not required to also add captive portals, additional terms of uses, or anything else. eduroam by itself stands alone, and you will know who this person. This person will be identified by their presence at the other school when they're visiting. And then finally, unless required by the NRO, the SP doesn't restrict visitors by using a particular EAP type. Our school might offer only one EAP type for our students, faculty and staff. But when visitors come to our school from other eduroam institutions, we must be able to forward all EAP types to the top level TLRS servers so that those users can get on with whatever EAP type that they're using. It's usually just an individual proxy. It's just a forward. We don't have to honor it at our campus for our local users, but we do have to make sure that we're forwarding it to the TLRS. Next slide, please. And the expectations of the NRO, and that would be Derek. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So recall that these are baseline expectations for the entire community, the eduroam US community, and of course the infrastructure operator is part of the community, right? So we have expectations laid out for the NRO. As you can see, cultivation of a community, promotion of best practices, maintaining responsive infrastructure. And this very webinar is part of that process. I can say confidently that Internet 2 has been very responsive to A lot of the things we're requesting as part of this baseline expectations working group, a lot of the requests coming from the community to the eduroam US Advisory Committee as an advisory body. So I'm excited to share that, but it's always good to lay out the expectations for all parties. And so none of this should be terribly earth-shaking, but it's there. You know, we expect as a community that the national roaming operator communicate with the community, seek feedback, facilitate communication between each other, promote good practices. For example, many of you are aware that the eduroam US knowledge base hosted by Internet2/InCommon has a variety of documents available to help people set up eduroam, whether K-12 or higher ed, various vendors. There's a great best practices document hosted there that was put together by the community in the past. We expect that the NRO works with other NROs in the GEGC as a community member of the larger global community, and communicates back to you know, our neck of the woods in the US, what's going on, what should change, and shares back, obviously. These baseline expectations, again, are a US thing because that's, you know, we can't just tell the rest of the world, hey, do this thing we're doing. But we really do hope that we see some good fruit from this, and this is something that others would want to adopt or emulate in some way. Let's see. I guess the last thing I would touch on is 10. Many of you are familiar with the Federation Manager tool that is provided through InCommon. Federation Manager is both for the InCommon Federation and the eduroam US Federation. And we just as you know, for your own users at your school or college or wherever you are, they expect a high quality of service from you and responsiveness about whether things are up or down, and you know, that you're taking good care of the infrastructure. Similarly, the community expects and depends on Internet2 to do the same for the roaming infrastructure. That includes the eduroam proxies, Federation Manager tooling, and so forth. So we just lay that out here. Next slide, please. And then a topic near and dear to my heart, expectations of the ESOs. Recall, ESOs are typically research and education networks or similar organizations who are supporting K-12s, libraries, museums, municipalities, and so forth in the eduroam ecosystem. The main expectation is just that they support and represent their constituents, those IDPs and SPs registered under them in their community. And with that, we saw in a previous slide where Mike Dixon talked about Certify, the incident response framework. While most of higher education is familiar with that, I would hope all of us on this call are, but you know, K-12s don't necessarily even know what that is, right? Because that wasn't a product of the K-12 community. That was a product of higher ed and research working together to you know, find common ground. So who translates that for a small, you know, night school out in rural Nevada who uses eduroam? Well, that's the role of the ESO, right? Or part of the role of the ESO. So we expect ESOs to be a trusted communication channel between those constituents they serve and other subscribers, like in higher ed or under other ESOs internationally and so forth. And then also to advocate for their constituents' needs to the NRO, Internet2, and promote the health and expansion of the eduroam US service. ESOs are certainly very big on advocating for the expansion of the eduroam service in their community, but we want to do it in a smart way, in a healthy way, and following the same expectations and rules and so forth as the rest of the community. We don't want there to be a divide between, oh, well, that's a K-12 eduroam subscriber, so of course they're not doing this right, or oh, that's a higher ed K-12 subscriber, so of course they do this way, right? Next slide, please. And I will hand this question back over to Mike D.
Yeah, actually, we had a couple of questions pop up in the Q&A. that speak to the last few slides. And Derek and Mike, I wonder if I could pose those to you. So the first one is, from a technical perspective, how would a misbehaving user be communicated to their home IDP? Thinking about the outer username usually being anonymous at school.edu and a MAC address, which could be randomized.
Mike, do you want to grab that one?
So Internet 2 will act as a proxy. We're not, you wouldn't be reaching out to the other school themselves. If there is a problem, if there's a situation where it may even escalate and there are outside parties who are interested in some of the behavior of a connection that was made while a user was somewhere else, um, those queries will be sent to Internet 2. Internet 2 does have some information that they can provide. And you're right, the outer identity may not be there. It may have an IP address, it may have a MAC address, it may have a timestamp in the logs in the EFM. And then Internet 2 will then proxy that over to the other institution and say, hey, we're trying to find a bad actor, or we're trying to find someone who had some issues. Here's the timestamp, here's the information. What can you tell us? Internet 2 doesn't really get in the middle of it. It just acts as a proxy. And I believe that this is built this way so that we don't have schools talking to other schools directly. We have schools talking to the proxy. The proxy manager in this case would be in Common or Internet 2. Does that help?
I'd add a couple things to that if I could. That said, using Internet 2 as the intermediary between your institution and the other institution is probably the best way to do it right now, in part because you don't necessarily have a way to contact that other institution, right? You don't know what the right contact is. Maybe it's their help address that's posted somewhere on their website. Maybe it's not. Maybe you have to go open a ticket through some process unknown to you as someone who's outside that, the visitors community. Part of our hope and expectation down the road by requiring up-to-date contact information, that first set of expectations for all subscribers, is that we can move to more of a, I know that the visitor came from UMass Amherst. I should be able to look up through some means who I need to contact there, right? So I think that for eduroam in the US to stay healthy and improve over time as the service scales, we are going to need to eventually be able to reach out to each other directly. But right now, it's as we saw in that when those early poll questions, there's not a lot of confidence in the community that we can reach the other party. So Internet 2 is the ideal first point of contact in that kind of situation right now. We hope that we can do some more direct contact in the future.
And part of what we mentioned, this very first phase of the baseline expectations is to collect data and collect baselines. And one of that is showing us that the contact information, as Derek alluded to earlier in the slides, may not be up to date. The people who formed this years ago for their school or college left, or the email is no longer valid. So once we get that closer to near 100% adoption, then we can start to have the conversation about reaching out and to people individually. But right now, we have this other sort of way to go around it. So I think this brings us up to poll question number 4. And that is something we talked about a little bit earlier. Does your organization publish instructions for connecting your users to eduroam? And this could really mean, are there table tents? Is it on a website? Is it part of the incoming pack? As we know, users are 4-year ephemera for students, faculty, staff. Are they seasoned? Do they know how to do this? Is it a renewed push every year? There's a lot of ways that we can get the word out.
While we're waiting, actually, we've got a few more questions that have come in, and I want to maybe tackle one of those.
Yeah.
Or invite Derek and Mike to tackle them rather. So will schools be required to publish the fingerprint of the key so that the user can trust on first use with some confidence? meaning they can see the published fingerprint, verify it, before TOEFL and the acceptance of the cert. It seems that the user is forced to trust on first use without any way to verify the certificate. I've tried this on Windows, Mac, iPhone, Android, and none inspire confidence that the WAP is authentic and not rogue.
I'll tackle that.
Right.
So the baseline expectations do not require that. But that said, it would be a good practice. Remember, the baseline expectations were intended to be less technical, a little broader, right, instead of the technical minutia. And here's one reason why. Many institutions use mobile device management tools, right? And they'll use that mobile device management tool to push a wireless profile to their client devices, to the ones managed by their school or college or whomever, right? When you do that, there isn't really a need to, publish that kind of information about the, certificate, thumbprint, and so forth, because it was bundled in the profile. You're not letting your end users, mess around with it, and it just is the way it is, and it's transparent. Other places may use such tools or not use such tools, but then you've got the BYOD case, right? Professor shows up with their own phone, decides they want to use eduroam for the first time, and then, okay, now what, right? In that case, yeah, it would be good to, publish that cert thumbprint, but that professor also needs to know where to even find that information in the first place, and, how to trust it, how to verify it. Often, I would posit, but I could be wrong. I would posit that if you have a user in that situation, particularly if they're roaming somewhere else, they're not going to take the time to, connect to 5G or LTE or something, and then go look and, see, oh, is this the right certificate? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm good. And then proceed. They're just going to accept it. So I think the better way to handle that is, like Mike mentioned earlier, if your users are already eduroaming at home, so to speak, at their home institution, they're not going to run into trouble later when they go roam. And the other side of that is, yeah, publish some information, but we don't prescribe that in this document.
Yeah, and again, not to get too technical, but there are onboarding. Someone I see wrote in cat tools. There are other third-party onboarding tools that you can use that can help validate that you're onboarding with the correct with your school and not a bad actor. And depending on the EAP type and depending on the OS, for instance, in Windows, you can ensure, and this should be built into your supplicant. This should be built into your supplicant's profile to validate server cert, and that's to basically check the cert that the endpoint is using against the radius cert that they're connecting to, not just say yes or not just trust any radius server that calls itself an eduroam endpoint. So there are some tools, there are some mechanisms in the technical world, and I believe Mac OS, I'm not sure if they have validate server cert, but with these tools that can bundle a supplicant, we can better tell the endpoint to don't just blindly trust, but trust only the certs. The certs that you're given are valid, or in the case again of TTLS, to trust that the server that you're connecting to is the one that you intend to connect to. So, Mike, is there anything else there, or?
Nope, I think we're good to go ahead.
Okay, great. So next slide, please. I did see a couple of questions in the webinar chat. Where's the link to this best baseline expectations? It's not finished yet, so almost official. This is still a draft, and we're really grateful to have this conversation with you all and others. Feedback is definitely welcome. I know you don't have anything to read yet. We understand that, but we're we're certainly welcome for what you've learned, what you've heard, and if you have any comments. Enhancement requests submitted to Internet 2 help establish a baseline for our baseline expectations. We do plan to shop this around again, discuss this at TechX in December, and that's in Denver. Mobility Day, ACamp, halls, we'll be talking about it. And then for those who have their name in the contact list for administrators in the EFM, keep an eye out in your email for community consultation. We'll look at feedback, revise before setting up to in-common steering. That's our next internal step. And then hopefully that can be up for adoption. The goal for community consultation level is December 2025. And I don't know if we have a goal for actually adoption, ratification, and publishing yet, but that will obviously come after that time. So Derek, I think next slide. Want to talk about where next?
All right. So once the baseline expectations for eduroam are approved, after we incorporate feedback from this webinar, from Mobility Day steering, and the community consultation and so forth, once it's approved, where do we go? The working group currently sees 3 phases, if you will. The first is awareness and adoption. We continue to spread the word about the expectations as a community, and with help from Internet 2, assess what the current adherence to baseline expectations is. Share the status back to the community. Hopefully we'll have some metrics we can share. And develop the working group, or the EAC rather, this may be a separate working group, wants to develop and publish some concrete guidance, some more of the technical details rather than the more succinct statements for folks to refer back to. And then hopefully be able to encourage some peer review and show and tell between institutions to say, hey, here's what we had to do to meet baseline expectations. Here are the hurdles we had. Here's how easy this expectation was to meet, and so forth. The next phase would be remediation, where as a community, we make a focused effort to do better together, with direct notifications and pointers to guidance to meet expectations, possibly coming through the NRO. Maybe some of these things could be surfaced through Federation Manager. Maybe there's direct contact happening. We're not quite sure what that looks like yet. And then finally, the maturity phase, where we're engaging in continuous improvement. The expectations are set. Both new and old subscribers know what the rules of the road are. And at that point, we will consider possibly implementing a dispute resolution process similar to what's in place for the in-common federation. And with that, we go to our last quick poll question, and then we'll open up for Q&A more generally. The quick poll question is, does your organization's IT documentation, whether internal or public-facing, tell users to ignore security certificates when connecting to eduroam? This question's a little spicy, hence the pepper. Some may not want to admit to it. Some may not care. It's okay. This is a safe place. But if we're going to do better together, we need to know, again, where the issues are. All right. Great. So you can see 78% of respondents said, no, we don't tell people to just ignore those security certificates. And a brave 22% said, actually, yeah, we do tell people to ignore it. And again, this isn't a judgment thing. We can totally understand why you would tell people to do that, especially because it is so hard to go verify that certificate when you're roaming, and folks at different technical levels are using the service. So I'm not saying that's a good thing, but definitely understandable. So thank you for your candor, that 22% who admitted to it. All right, with that, I think we move on to Mike Z to grab some quick Q&A before we're out of time.
We have one standing question here, or one open question. I'm an eduroam admin for a community college system. we have a system-wide identity for students. However, each college has a local identity for faculty and staff. Now that eduroam is deployed, some colleges would like to use it as a primary SSID for all users and include their local domains and radius servers. We want to keep everything under the system umbrella rather than have each school go off and get their own eduroam agreement. For this scenario, are we better? Oh, I can actually answer this one. For this scenario, are we better off being classified in as ESO? The answer is no. The ESO program is really only open to state educational networks or regional educational networks or other entities that serve the K-12s and libraries and museums in their state. So I don't think a community college system wouldn't fall under that, and you might need to look at a different technical approach to handling that kind of bifurcation of identity for students versus staff and faculty. I don't know, Derek or Mike, if you have anything you'd want to recommend for an approach there.
I would almost tend to agree. Your individual community college would be seen as individual IDPs, I think. And of course, it sounds like students have the same uh, identity system-wide when faculty staff are different. And each individual radius infra at each community college could be trained to, look local if it has, this domain and look out if not. What that sounds like it would mean, though, is if you have two community colleges that you oversee and faculty travels from one to another, they would be basically coming into that other as a visitor, even though they're sort of associated with that other community college. They would come in seen, I believe, as a visitor.
I think I would add that I do feel your pain a bit, Alicia. So you all may have noticed Nevada's system of higher education, not K-12 education. We're different entities in our state, just based on how the lay of the land is. So we've run into a few situations where the model doesn't perfectly fit our needs. But I would suggest that one approach you could take is you continue to operate eduroam infrastructure for the students, and then you operate a separate one for each of those higher ed colleges for the faculty and staff, and they use a different realm. Obviously those colleges will need to be subscribed to eduroam through internet through the proper technical administrative means, but you as a system could still operate those eduroam IDPs on behalf of the colleges. That could be one approach you could take.
Awesome. That's the one. All right. Well, thank you all so much for participating today. And many, many thanks to Derek, Mike for this deeper look into the eduroam baseline expectations. It was a great discussion, and we appreciate all the great questions. So look forward to seeing